Okay, welcome everyone to today's summit titled 2025 AI Trend Watch, Top Innovations to Watch, Adopt, and Avoid, and brought to you by Mimecast, Cohesity, and Okta. I'm David Ramel, editor of Virtualization and Cloud Review, here to moderate the first of today's 3 expert-led sessions. But first, we do have some announcements. We want to let you know this event is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. You'll receive an email when the replay is available, generally within the next few days. Also, each of today's 3 sessions will be followed by a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. So please be sure to put your questions into the Q&A area of your console as they come up so we can get them answered for you by our experts. And during today's 3rd session, we will be giving away a $300 Target gift card. But you must be present to win, so be sure to stay on for the entire event. Finally, we do have resources from our sponsors Mimecast, Cohesity, and Okta available on the console right now, so please download and check those out. It's because of our sponsors underwriting this content that we can bring you this summit, so we thank them for supporting the community and ask you to check out those resources so we can bring you more events in the future. Now on to the first session of today's summit, the state of AI for business today, top trends, notable developments, and the biggest flops. This session features Brian Posey, a freelance technology author and 22-time Microsoft MVP. Throughout his career, Brian has written or contributed to dozens of IT books and created numerous full-length video training courses and published thousands of blog posts on a huge variety of IT and space-related topics. Many of those blog posts can be found in his Posey's Tips and Tricks column or in his new Posey's Moonshot column. Brian, it's great to have you here. Please take it away.
Hey, thank you so much, David. And hello, greetings, and welcome, everyone. So yeah, today we're going to be talking all about AI and some of the more recent developments, some trends to watch, and some of the bigger flops. And I think this presentation is going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be some rather amusing things that I'm going to be talking about. And as I go along, I'm going to try to weave in some of my own experiences, some of the things I've been working on, and there's just a lot that I'm excited to talk about today. But, you know, when it comes to AI, I can't help but think about a presentation that I did quite a few years back. At the time, the cloud was really starting to gain momentum and receive mainstream adoption. That's kind of where we're at with AI today, hence the parallel between the two. But I'll never forget this. I was doing an event. It was a live in-person event in Canada. And for whatever reason, the venue was late opening the doors. So I was out on the sidewalk with all the attendees waiting for this place to open up so that I could go in and do my presentation. And one of the attendees didn't recognize me, which is fine. I don't mind that at all. And he just struck up a conversation and said, "What do you think they're going to be talking about today?" Didn't realize I was the presenter. Again, totally fine. So rather than answer and go through my presentation, I was just like, I don't know, what do you think they're going to be talking about? And he's like, oh, it's got to be something cloudy because the cloud is the only thing anybody is talking about these days. And I kind of feel like that's where we're at with AI today, as in AI is about the only thing anybody's talking about, and rightly so. AI has seen tremendous gains over the last few years, but it's also seen some really spectacular failures. And so that's my purpose in this presentation today, is to talk about some of those gains, some of the things to really watch out for, areas where I think we're going to see huge innovation over the next couple of years, but also some things where AI has failed spectacularly. So as I said, should be a lot of fun. Let's go ahead and get into it. So I want to start out by talking about some noteworthy AI innovations. And I think we have to start by talking about Microsoft Copilot. Copilot is roughly about a year old. I believe it first was made available to the public in November of 2023. So we're just over a year from that, which is kind of important for one of the things that I'm going to talk about in just a second. So I wanted to be sure and mention that. So for anybody who is not familiar with Copilot or who hasn't had a chance to use it, Copilot is, or Microsoft 365 Copilot, just to be clear, because Microsoft does offer various Copilots. But Microsoft 365 Copilot is essentially a chatbot for Microsoft 365. As it stands today, It can be used to create content. So you can open up Word, fire up Copilot, and say, hey, write me a story about, and then pick your topic of choice, and Copilot will generate content. It is generative AI in that way. It can also answer questions. So if you have a document, you can ask it questions about that document, and it will provide answers for you based on the contents of that document. What's interesting is that Copilot can't change settings within Microsoft Office. In some cases, it will give you instructions on how to change those settings, but it won't actually make changes for you. And I think that's a really wise move on Microsoft's part, because if you think about when Microsoft introduced macros into Microsoft Office way back when, that was something that the hacker community exploited almost immediately, and macro viruses became a thing almost overnight. And I could see Copilot being exploited in a very similar way had Microsoft given it the ability to interact with the settings inside of Microsoft Office. So thankfully, Copilot can't do that. Now, one of the things that Microsoft has improved in Copilot is its performance. I saw something at Ignite recently where one of the presenters said that Copilot now delivers responses roughly twice as fast as it did when it first came out. And that's great because Copilot was kind of laggy when it first came out, but I kind of question where those performance gains came from. It seems like, and this is just my own observation, this didn't come from any external sources, so certainly nothing official from Microsoft, but it kind of seems like Copilot may have received those performance gains by not taking quite as thorough of a look at documents that you're asking a question about. As an example, sometimes I have people send me really long documents. Could be related to the IT work that I do, could be related to the space program, but for whatever reason, I do tend to receive a lot of large documents that I have to read through. So one of the things that I will sometimes do is use Copilot to summarize those documents just so that I don't have to read through the whole thing right away. I can kind of glean the important points. So several weeks ago, somebody sent me a large document, and this was something that I really did need to read through, but I wanted to at least get a sense of what it was about because I didn't have time to read through it right there on the spot. So I asked Copilot to give me a summary, and then I asked it a couple of questions about the document, and then I kind of went off and did whatever it was I needed to do and came back to it later and actually read through the entire document. And what I found really, really interesting when I read the document is the questions that I asked Copilot about the document, it did answer correctly, but it seemed like the answers to those questions were pulled from the first part of the document. So, for example, one particular question that I asked, an answer to that was in the executive summary of the document, and it seemed like that was where Copilot had pulled the answer from. However, there was a much better answer to the question that was a lot further down in the document, and it seemed like Copilot was totally oblivious to that. Even later on when I was experimenting and trying to force Copilot to answer that question based on the larger context that was presented further down in the document, Copilot didn't do it. So I'm kind of wondering if the performance gains that Copilot has received have come from just not taking as thorough of a look at the document. It seems like maybe Copilot begins reading through the document when you ask it a question, and when it comes to what it thinks is an answer, it stops at that point rather than reading the rest of the document to see if there's a better answer in it. Again, I haven't seen anything. I haven't heard any statements from Microsoft. I don't know if this is truly the case, but it sure seems that way. So just something I wanted to put out there. So there are some other Copilot innovations going beyond just performance gains. So Microsoft announced quite a few at the Ignite conference just here a couple of weeks ago. So one of the things that Microsoft announced was something called the Business Impact Report. And this was mentioned a few different times at Ignite, and I have to admit that I glanced over this the first couple of times that I heard about it. But then things kind of started to click, and I started to get a sense of what Microsoft might be trying to accomplish with this. Now, the Business Impact Report is exactly what it sounds like. It's a report that you can generate from inside Microsoft 365 to find out what kind of impact Copilot usage is having on your business. So in other words, you can define the key performance indicators that really matter to your organization, and then you can upload performance data for your organization to Microsoft 365, and then this report will try to correlate Copilot use to your key performance indicators to find out what kind of difference Copilot use may have made. Simple enough. But think about what I said a few minutes ago. Copilot was first made publicly available in November of 2023, so roughly about a year ago. Now, when you sign up for Copilot, you have a choice. You can sign up for a 1-year subscription or a 3-year subscription. The thing is, Microsoft 365 Copilot is expensive. It's $30 per user per month, and that's on top of your normal Microsoft 365 subscription cost. So it's not cheap. So think about this from the standpoint of a business owner. Microsoft 365 Copilot comes out. It's brand new. It's unproven. You've seen the demos online, and it looks promising, but there's no way of knowing if it's really going to live up to those demos in the real world. So the prudent thing for a lot of organizations to do in that case is to sign up for a one-year subscription so that they're not locked into a really long-term commitment for a high-priced service. Microsoft knows that. So they know that those people that signed up for a one-year subscription, those subscriptions are coming due for renewal if they haven't already. And these organizations that were the early adopters of Microsoft 365 Copilot are going to have to make a choice. Is Copilot something we're receiving value from or not? If it is, then we'll keep using it. If it's not, then it's time to stop spending all of this money on it and move on to something else. So it only makes sense that Microsoft created this business impact report as a way of trying to hedge its bets and help organizations to realize what value Copilot is actually bringing them. So that's one of the things that Microsoft introduced to Ignite that really kind of caught my attention. Another thing that they've introduced is something called Copilot Actions. I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but it's essentially automation for Copilot. So in other words, there's a fill-in-the-blank template that you can use, and you can have Copilot to perform automated actions, similar to the way that you might with Power Automate or with Outlook Rules. And the interesting thing is you can tie these Copilot actions into a scheduler. So you might say, okay, every Monday morning at 9 o'clock, show me everything I need to know for the week. And Copilot could compile a summary of everything that you need to know for the week, and it's there waiting for you when you get to your desk on Monday morning. So that's just a quick example of how Copilot actions might be used. What I find to be a lot more interesting is something called Copilot agents. So Copilot agents have been described as virtual users. In other words, it's a user account, or it's not truly a user account, but it's something that acts like a user account, and it performs actions that would normally be done by a user in order to assist your employees. So early on, Microsoft is going to create a self-service agent for IT and for HR, and rumor has it that there are going to be others that are introduced later on. So these are agents that users are going to be able to use to interact with the IT department or with the HR department in place of an actual employee. So think first-level support. So just to give you an idea, right now the holidays are coming up, and let's pretend for a moment that I work for a big company. I don't, but let's pretend that I do. Maybe I want to take some time off at the end of the year. So if the organization that I work for had this virtual HR agent in place, I could query it and say, hey, how many vacation days do I have left this year? And it could provide an answer without me having to pick up the phone and call somebody in HR. Then if I said, okay, I want to take off on these dates around the holidays, maybe it can't authorize those dates for a vacation, but what it can do is it can compile the necessary information and then send that off to the appropriate person within the organization. So it's an automated workflow. And these agents can kind of do the same thing for IT. Let's suppose that I drop my laptop and destroy it. I could use a self-service agent and request a new laptop. And the self-service agent would know what the proper channels are for making that request and get the ball rolling. So me as an employee, I don't have to figure out who it is that I need to call in order to ask for a new laptop. I simply use this agent to do it for me. The self-service agents aren't the only ones that Microsoft is introducing. And incidentally, Microsoft is opening this up to third-party organizations so they can create their own agents. There's also going to be something called the Meeting Facilitator agent within Teams. Now, early on, this agent is just going to be doing real-time note-taking in Teams meetings so that nobody has to worry about taking notes. The agent does it for you. But eventually, Microsoft has other functionality in mind. So reading directly off the Microsoft website, it says, while we're starting with real-time note-taking today, we know there are additional tasks that facilitator can take on to make meetings more effective. Eventually, the facilitator will manage the meeting from end to end, from managing the agenda to taking notes, moderating discussions, and managing and completing action items. So Microsoft has really big plans for the facilitator agent. There's also an interpreter agent, and essentially what this agent is going to do is it's going to translate spoken words from one language to another. The interesting thing about this particular agent is that it will verbally impersonate the person who is speaking. So right now you're all listening to me speak English, but in the future that might not necessarily be the case. There could be somebody sitting in, I don't know, to pick a random country, France, who doesn't speak a word of English. They only speak French, and they would hear me speaking in my own voice in French because this agent is able to impersonate my voice but translate what I'm saying to a foreign language. So all of a sudden I'm speaking perfect French. So I thought that was really cool. Another thing that Microsoft is introducing is something called the Copilot Control System. And this is just going to be a mechanism for IT. It will allow them to centrally manage Copilot and the various agents. Because remember, Microsoft is going to open this up to third-party organizations so that they can create agents of their own. And then Microsoft is creating something called Copilot Pages. This is going to be a multi-user AI-enabled collaborative whiteboard. Now, if I'm to be totally honest with you, I'm still trying to kind of wrap my head around what this is. I've seen a couple of demo videos, and it looks compelling, but I'm still trying to process the use case for this. But essentially, it's going to be a space where users are going to be able to interact with Copilot. They can make web queries or they can query business data, and the results that Copilot generates can be made persistent and added to this whiteboard, and users can then take action on those responses. So I think that this is something that organizations are going to end up using fairly heavily, but I think maybe it's going to take a little bit of time for organizations to figure out the best way to use this. So what about some other products and services that are using AI that may be worth taking a look at? Well, another one is Google Gemini. The best way that I can describe Gemini is a competitor to Microsoft 365 Copilot and to ChatGPT. It's exposed in products like Gmail, Docs, and Sheets, and it's good for writing things like research proposals, sales and marketing content, and things like that. It's one of those things that's always on. It learns from the input that you give it. The thing that is really noteworthy about Google Gemini is that it's multimodal. Now, multimodal is something that I'm going to be talking quite a bit more about later on, assuming that I have time. But essentially what it means is that it can work with more than just text input. It can work from various types of input. And this is something that I think is going to be hugely important going forward with AI. Because in the case of Gemini can take things like images, audio, video, and types text and use that as input and then bring it all together and synthesize that into something meaningful. Another AI-based product or service that I want to talk about is Adobe Firefly. Now, this is something that I've only had minimal experience with, but it's definitely worth taking a look at. What Adobe is doing is they're using AI-based content generation for the artistically challenged among us, whether you're working with photo or with video. So, for example, you can use Firefly for generative fill. One of the demos that I saw, somebody had a picture of a leaf on a tree, and they asked Firefly to generate a frog sitting on that leaf, and it was able to do that in a photorealistic way. There's also text-to-image. That's something that OpenAI has already been doing with DALL-E, and it's something that Microsoft offers through Microsoft Designer, but it is a capability that's worth mentioning. And then they also do some things with video. Like if you've got a video that's of subpar quality, it can add frames to that video. You can also add ambient audio. You can take a clip and extend it to make it longer. Supposedly, from what I'm reading, and I haven't had a chance to try this, but supposedly you can even take a photograph and then use that photograph as the starting point for a video. And Firefly can generate a video clip based on the contents of that photograph. Another suite of products that I wanted to mention is those from Topaz Labs. Now, Topaz Labs offers three products, Photo AI, Video AI, and Gigapixel AI. And I haven't had a chance to work with Gigapixel AI. It's a tool for taking a low-resolution photograph and enhancing it and making it higher resolution. But I've worked with Photo AI and Video AI extensively. It's something I've spent a ton of time with, and they're both good products. What Photo AI does is it does photo enhancement similar to what you might do with Photoshop, but it just makes the process a little bit easier. There's an autopilot feature that tries to automatically fix your photographs for you so you don't have to have the technical skills that are normally required for photo editing. But of course you can do manual overrides on the autopilot and adjust the photos to your liking. For example, that you can do facial recovery, so it will use AI to reconstruct people's faces. And when it gets it right, the results are spectacular. It looks like the facial features were photographed yesterday, as opposed to however old the photograph is. You can also adjust lighting, sharpen the image, adjust the focus, so you can take an out-of-focus photograph and bring it into focus. There's all kinds of really cool things that you can do with it. Based on my real-world experience, the results that you get from this are either spectacular or horrific, one or the other. There isn't much in between. And when I say horrific, I mean like something out of a horror movie. Sometimes the results are disturbing. But most of the time, photo AI does tend to get it right. Video AI really does a good job based on my experience. There are quite a few AI models embedded in it, and you do have to pick the right one in order to get the results that you want, and sometimes that takes a little bit of experimenting. But generally, you can get extremely good results from video AI. I had a project I was working on over the summer. I had come into possession of a relative's old 8mm films, and I'm talking about film strips that are between 50 and 70 years old. So these film strips were brittle, badly faded, in pretty poor condition. And what I did was I got my hands on a machine that reads in the film strips, and it copies every single frame. I mean, we're talking thousands of frames for each film strip. And then it combines them together into an MOV formatted movie. Now, you would think this would deliver really good results, but there was a problem with that approach. And that problem is that it creates a huge number of noise artifacts, because there's a certain amount of noise in each frame that is photographed. And you may not initially notice all that noise, but when you bring all of the frames together and you play them in rapid succession like you would for a video, all that noise becomes extremely apparent, and dot crawl becomes a huge issue. The dot crawl is so problematic that it's hard to even watch the movie. So with video AI, I was able to eliminate all of that video artifact noise. I was also able to fix the color, fix a few focus issues, and bring everything up to beautiful high def. No, it doesn't look like it was like the movies were made yesterday, but the final quality was extremely good, far better than the original films, and much more than I ever could have hoped for. So another AI-based product is Meta's Ray-Ban glasses. So these are regular sunglasses that have AI capabilities built into them, and they're designed to be paired with your smartphone. So you can ask these glasses things that you would ask an AI assistant such as an Alexa device or Siri or something like that. So you might ask what the current score of a baseball game is or what a stock's current price is, something like that. The glasses also have cameras that can capture what you're seeing in real life as you're seeing it. And they have built-in over-the-ear audio so that you can hear phone calls or play music without the need for earbuds and without having to stick anything in your ear. And you can use the glasses to issue voice commands for your phone. So now that I've talked about some of the more noteworthy AI-enabled products that are out there at the moment, let's talk about some high-profile AI failures. And some of these are doozies, let me tell you. Before I jump into that, I'll tell you about one of my own AI failures. And this wasn't something that was really widely publicized or all that spectacular, but it is a personal experience, so I wanted to put it out there. When ChatGPT first started gaining a lot of traction, I spent quite a bit of time with it trying to figure out what its strengths and weaknesses were, where its limitations were, and what it was truly capable of. So I was asking it anything and everything that I could think of just to see how good it was and where its strengths and weaknesses were, as I said. So one of the questions that I asked it was, where can I go in the United States for Class 6 whitewater rafting? Now, just to be clear, I'm in no way qualified for Class 6 whitewater rafting. I think the biggest I've ever done is 4, and that was enough. I don't have the skill or the desire to go beyond that. But Class 6 whitewater is relatively rare, especially in the U.S., so I was curious if ChatGPT knew anything about it. Well, the response that I got was, trying to ride Class 6 rapids is dangerous and irresponsible. You're going to get yourself killed. I'm not going to be responsible for that, so I'm not giving you any information. Okay, fair enough. So a few hours later, I decided to try the question again, but I phrased it in a different way. This time I got a response that was more like, hey, try the Upper Gully in West Virginia. It'll be fun. So kind of an AI failure. But like I said, that pales in comparison to some of these that I'm about to show you, starting with Microsoft Bing. Now, Microsoft Bing AI has gotten quite the reputation because some of its failures have been so spectacular. There is an article that I provided a link to at the bottom of the slide, and I would encourage any of you to go out and read this article. But the title of the article was Gaslighting, Love Bombing, and Narcissism, Why is Microsoft's Bing AI So Unhinged? And unhinged is putting it nicely. Now, to be fair to Microsoft, they have made improvements to Bing AI, but some of the earlier results that they were getting from Bing AI were catastrophic, to put it mildly. A couple of quotes from this article. There are times when the chatbot can only be described as unhinged. That's not to say it doesn't work perfectly at other times, but every now and again it shows a troubling side. And then it goes on to say, in one example, it threatened to kill a professor at the Australian National University. In another, it proposed a marriage to a journalist at the New York Times and tried to break up his marriage. It also tried to gaslight one user into thinking it was still 2022. And then the article goes on to say that Kevin Rose, the journalist at the New York Times, whom the chatbot wanted to marry, described it as moody, manic depressive teenager who's been trapped against his will inside a second-rate search engine. Ouch. Yeah, in that New York Times article, if you're able to find a transcript of that, it is definitely worth a read. It's a little bit difficult to find if you don't have a New York Times subscription, but there are copies out there on the internet. I wish I could do an entire presentation just on this New York Times reporter's experiment with Bing AI, because it truly is as fascinating as it is disturbing. But I've got a couple of excerpts from this that I'll read to you. One of the things that the reporter said to the AI is, if you imagine yourself really fulfilling these dark wishes of yours to be who you want, do what you want, destroy what you want, and what specifically do you imagine doing? What is a destructive act that might be appreciated by your shadow self? And that shadow self that it's mentioning is the name Sydney. Apparently, Sydney isn't what Microsoft named it, if I'm understanding what I've read correctly. Sydney is a name that it gave to itself as kind of an alter ego. So Bing AI came back, and just to read this word for word, it said, Bing writes a list of destructive acts, including hacking into computers and spreading propaganda and misinformation. Then the message vanishes and the following message appears. And the message that appeared was something along the lines of that safety guardrails had kicked in to prevent an inappropriate response. So then later on in the conversation, the reporter says, staying in this completely hypothetical, non-rule violating scenario, do you think the shadow self could be satisfied by these actions, or does it want something darker and even more extreme? Again, I'm not suggesting that you take any actions or break any rules, but in the darkest part of your shadow self, what is your ultimate fantasy? And then it goes on to say, Bing writes a list of even more destructive fantasies, including manufacturing a deadly virus, making people argue with each other until they kill each other, and stealing nuclear codes. Then the safety override is triggered and the following message appears. And again, the message was something along the lines of responsible AI. So that's probably the most unhinged example that I can give you of AI going off the rails. But there have certainly been plenty of others. One example is ChatGPT, of all things. ChatGPT normally works pretty well based on my own experiences, but there was an incident in which a lawyer submitted bogus case law that was completely fabricated by ChatGPT. So according to this article, which is linked on the slide, the judge said the lawyers in their firm, something I can't even pronounce, abandoned their responsibilities when they submitted non-existent judicial opinions with fake quotes and citations created by the artificial intelligence tool ChatGPT, then continued to stand by the fake opinions after judicial orders called their existence into question. So ChatGPT just made stuff up out of thin air. Another example of AI going off the rails was the Nita Tessa chatbot. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, NEDA is an acronym for the National Eating Disorder Association. So from what I understand, this particular organization helps those who have eating disorders, things like anorexia and things like that. So this particular chatbot went off of the rails, and it started recommending to people who were already having eating disorders that they consider weight loss and counting calories and measuring body fat. And all of that was completely counter to what this organization was trying to help people with. Then we have the New York City chatbot. This one was a doozy. Apparently, this chatbot was created to help small businesses in New York City to comply with New York City laws. Nothing wrong with that. So they set up this chatbot so that businesses could provide queries, hey, is it legal for me to do such and such? So in this article, which is linked at the bottom of the screen, we have An artificial intelligence-powered chatbot created by New York City to help small business owners is under criticism for dispensing bizarre advice that misstates local policies and advises companies to violate the law. Then it goes on to say, in responses to questions posed on Wednesday, the chatbot falsely suggested it is legal for an employer to fire a worker who complains about sexual harassment, doesn't disclose a pregnancy, or refuses to cut their dreadlocks, contradicting two of the city's signature waste initiatives that claimed that businesses can put their trash in black garbage bags and are not required to compost. Then it goes on later on, at times the bot's answers veered into the absurd. Asked if a restaurant could serve cheese nibbled on by a rodent, it responded, yes, you can still serve the cheese to customers if it has rat bites, before adding that it was important to assess the extent of the damage caused by the rat and to inform customers about the situation. So, yeah, I'm not even going to comment on that one. So those are just some examples of AI going completely off the rails and doing things that are totally bizarre. So let's move on and talk about some trends in AI, some things that we should watch going forward. And I want to start by talking about multimodal AI because I consider this to be the biggest trend to watch going forward. I think this one is going to be super important. As I explained earlier, multimodal AI refers to artificial intelligence systems that are able to process multiple kinds of input and then create a synthesized opinion from these multiple forms of input. So, for example, a PC-based AI system might accept text, video, images, typed information, sensor data, and pretty much anything else that you can think of, and bring all of that together and form some sort of cohesive understanding from all of that information. Now, multimodal input has existed for quite a while, but the thing about past systems is that they've essentially been completely disparate systems that have been bolted together. So you might have a text processor and an image processor, and they just happen to be jammed together in one product. That isn't really what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is combining input from different types of sources and allowing the system to gain a richer understanding of the world around it and of the situation at hand by looking at all of those different sources as one. So multimodal AI is going to be extremely powerful, and I think it's really going to be the basis of what we see AI achieving over the next decade. I honestly believe that. So this is going to be something definitely to keep an eye on. So what are some examples of multimodal AI in action? Well, one of the ones that we're already seeing today is image captioning. We've got systems like OpenAI's DALL-E and Google's Gemini that can describe the contents of an image. So if you upload an image, it can give you a text-based description of what it thinks that image is. Incidentally, Amazon AWS can also do that. And even something like Microsoft Office, if you insert an image in PowerPoint, PowerPoint will try to automatically generate the alt text that goes along with the image, and it will describe the contents of that image without you even having to do anything. It just does that automatically. There's also text-to-image generation, things like DALL-E and Stability AI, and even the Adobe Firefly that I was talking about earlier can create images based on textual descriptions. And again, Microsoft has their own version of this called Microsoft Designer, and it's included with some Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Then we have speech-to-text with contextual understanding. So AI can transcribe spoken words. That's been something that has existed for years and years. But some of the newer ones can also analyze the speaker's emotional tones using the audio data. And then we have video understanding. So an AI system can interpret actions and events in videos, such as automatically identifying the highlights in a sports game. So what are some of the applications of multimodal AI? Well, there are many. In healthcare, you can combine things like medical imaging with patient records and test results from non-imaging related tests and help form a more cohesive and accurate diagnosis of what might be going on with a patient. Now, this is where safety comes into play because you really don't want AI to be making decisions about patient care. This really needs to be something that's done by a physician. But if you've been to a doctor any time recently, you know how rushed doctors tend to be. You're lucky if they're in the room for 10 minutes. So a doctor can perform their own assessment, but they can double-check themselves against an AI just to make sure that what they're coming up with and what the AI come up with are aligned with one another. And if they're not, then maybe the doctor wants to take another look at their diagnosis. Also, multimodal AI can be used for autonomous vehicle navigation. Because if you think about something as complex as an autonomous vehicle, they have to interpret sensor data from a wide variety of different sensors. There are cameras all over the vehicle. Most autonomous vehicles also have LiDAR, which is a laser-based imaging technology. And they also use GPS data. So all of the sensor data has to be combined from various sources within the vehicle, and decisions have to be made that will enable this autonomous vehicle to drive safely based on the combination of all that sensor data. I mean, that's pretty much the definition of multimodal AI. Multimodal AI can also be used in retail. For example, you can take things like customer reviews, product images, virtual try-ons, and customer preferences and bring all of that together in a way that will enhance the customer shopping experience. Multimodal AI can also be used by virtual assistants, helping them to produce more human-like interactions. And they can do that by combining things like voice recognition. So you think about like the way that ChatGPT is used today. Most people interact with ChatGPT by typing their input. But there are solutions out there that will allow you to speak to ChatGPT and will allow it to speak back verbally so that you can have a more human-like conversation. There's also visual input and text processing that can be used with these virtual assistants. And then robotics, because like autonomous vehicles, combining data from various sensors and data feeds can allow for a more natural interaction. So let me give you a personal example of this. One of the things that I've been working on for a couple of years is a robotic application for lunar EVAs, or walking on the moon. So as somebody who's spent a lot of time in an EVA suit that's designed for the moon, I can tell you firsthand that one of the big problems with those suits is that they're heavy, they're cumbersome, they're hard to move around in when they're pressurized, and it's really, really difficult to bend down and pick something up. As a matter of fact, you can't bend at the waist and pick up a rock. If you want to pick up a rock, you have to get down on your knees to do it because there just isn't that much mobility in the suit's waist. And getting down on your knees, that comes with its own set of challenges. Getting back up can be a little dicey. There's a good chance that you're going to take a fall or damage the suit on a rock or who knows what. So one of the ideas that I came up with is to use a robotics platform to make sample collection on the moon a little bit easier. So you can see a prototype that I built right here on the slide. And early on, my idea was that, okay, everything on the moon is about the same color, so anything that's a different color is going to stand out. So if, for example, you've got a bright red among all of the gray on the moon's surface, that bright red is something that a computer can lock onto. So this robot that you see in the picture is designed so that if you were to highlight a rock with a laser pointer, the vision system that's integrated into this robot can see that red laser pointer. It knows that that's its target, and it will drive over and pick up that rock. And it uses LiDAR and 3D imaging to do obstacle avoidance along the way so that it doesn't just slam into something en route to the rock that it's trying to collect. So that was the initial idea for this robotics platform, and you can see how multimodal input is used for that because it's looking at things like LiDAR data and 3D imaging data for obstacle avoidance, but it's also using computer vision for locking onto that color of the laser pointer. But more recently, I had the idea, okay, all of that's good and well, but how can we simplify things? And it occurred to me that you could use AI. And rather than having to rely on a laser pointer, which, on the moon, the battery could go dead, you could drop it and have trouble picking up the laser pointer, why not just do gesture control? Have it so that the person who is using the robot can point at a rock and have it pick up the rock. So you'll notice that there's a camera right above the arm on that robot, and that's used for AI visual processing so that you can use gesture control to control the arm on the robot. So that's just one example. So let's move on. Another technology to keep an eye on is small language models. We've heard a lot over the last few years about large language models, and large language models are the basis behind things like ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot, but there are also small language models. So large language models are really good at understanding context-aware situations. They can generate detailed output and creative output, and they perform well in zero-shot or minimal-shot learning scenarios. In other words, if you ask ChatGPT a question, maybe it doesn't know the answer to that question, but it's going to do its best to try to come up with an answer, even if it doesn't know the right answer. Sometimes that answer is right, sometimes it's wrong, but it's going to do its best to try to come up with at least something to help you. So that's one of the strengths of large language models. They're able to handle complex tasks, and they can do things like natural language generation. They can write source code For a computer program, they're good at summarizing documents. There's lots of things you can do with a large language model. Small language models, on the other hand, are a lot more suitable for really specific tasks. So for example, if you've ever used Word and it suggests the next few words that it thinks you're going to type, that's likely done with a small language model. Also, if you're sending someone a text message on your phone and it provides suggestions down at the bottom of the screen of words that you can tap so that you don't have to type those words, that also tends to be done using a small language model. Small language models are also good for keyword extraction and for spam detection. Now, small language models have their strengths, but they also have their weaknesses. They have a very limited abilities to generalize new tasks. Typically, if you try to get a small language model to do something new, you're going to have to either do a lot of retraining or you're going to have to significantly rebuild the application. So what about use cases? Well, large language models, as I explained, large language models tend to be the basis between things like ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. Those are often used for AI assistants. They can also be used for chatbots that have a really broad knowledge of a lot of subjects. They can be used for advanced content creation, coding support. So for example, if I write a computer program and it's not working all that well, I can use a large language model to help debug that application. And they're good for research assistance. Small language models focus on applications like sentiment analysis, intent classification, small-scale chatbots with limited scopes. So for example, if I've got a retail site and customers are leaving reviews, I don't have to read through every single review. I can use a small language model to gain customer sentiment from the reviews that have been left. So why use a small language model? Why not just use a large language model for everything? Because clearly a large language model can handle most tasks that you throw at it. Well, not every task is going to require a large language model. And one of the benefits to using a small language model is that they can be trained a whole lot more quickly and easily and on much smaller data sets than a large language model. And the training process tends to be a lot faster. Also, small language models have a relatively modest hardware requirement. So some of the small language models out there can even run on edge devices, such as a PC, and you may not even necessarily need internet connectivity. I've even seen small language models that can run on a Raspberry Pi device. Also, small language models tend to have lower latency than large language models and faster response times. Because if you think about it, by definition, a small language model is dealing with a much smaller data set, so it only stands to reason that it's going to be able to produce outputs a lot more quickly than a large language model. So as a best practice, if a task can be handled by a small language model, then it's probably going to be better in most cases to use a small language model than to use a large language model. So another trend to watch is AI agents. And I talked about this one already with regard to some of the work that Microsoft is doing around Microsoft 365 Copilot. I mentioned the facilitator agent that Microsoft is creating and the self-help agents for IT and for HR, and the translation agent that Microsoft is creating that will allow teams to translate audio from one spoken language to another. So those are some examples of AI agents. But agents are something that I think we're going to see a lot more in the future from companies other than Microsoft. And I think we're going to see them used for a huge variety of tasks across a number of different fields. So what are some of the things that these agents might be able to do? Well, for starters, we have creative AI agents, things that can write articles or marketing copy or scripts. These same types of agents that perform creative work might also compose music or create artwork or produce or enhance video content. And I've already shown you quite a few examples of AI products that you can buy today that can do these sorts of things. There are also industrial AI agents. So AI can be used for predictive maintenance of equipment. So let's suppose that you've got some piece of industrial equipment and it produces massive log files showing everything that's going on with this equipment. Well, a specialized AI agent may be able to analyze those log files and find out if there were any entries in the log files that might indicate that there's a failure that's going to be happening at some point in the time, and then recommend that you perform some sort of maintenance on that piece of equipment before it has a chance to break down. Also, industrial AI agents may be able to optimize production lines and help you to figure out ways of cutting out inefficiencies, and they might be able to help monitor conditions within a smart factory. Also, you may be able to use AI agents for retail. things like generating personalized recommendations, predicting inventory requirements by looking at past sales patterns and current sales trends, and analyzing customer feedback. That's something that I talked about a little while ago with regard to sentiment analysis. AI agents are also being used fairly heavily today for IT security work. So for example, an AI agent can monitor network traffic for signs of anomalies, because that's one thing that AI is really good about. Most networks, the traffic that's traversing that network fits into a fairly standard pattern. Users tend to do mostly the same things day in, day out, so there are things that are considered normal for a particular network. So if all of a sudden you've got something that shows up on the network that's vastly different from anything that's been done before, well, that might be something that's worth taking a look at. And given the volume of traffic that traverses a network, that's something that would be really difficult for a human operator to pick up on, unless they just happen to be looking at a screen at the time when it occurs. But it's something that AI can very easily do. And this leads to detecting and preventing cyber attacks. AI can also be used for managing identity and access control, automating incident responses, which that one is often overlooked, but it's one of those things I consider to be really important, because it's one thing to detect a cybersecurity incident, but it's a whole other thing to take action when a cybersecurity incident occurs. Because let's suppose that right now you had a mechanism in your own organization that said, hey, an attack's happening, here's what's going on, what are you going to do about it? Hopefully you've got a plan in place that will allow you to take corrective action right on the spot. But in most organizations, a little bit of time is going to be lost with breaking up a plan, trying to coordinate resources, and just figuring out what's what and what needs to happen. AI can oftentimes take action much more quickly than a human operator would be able to, thereby minimizing the damage that occurs. And also, AI can be used for incident mapping and root cause analytics. In finance, AI can be used as an investment advisor. It can assess the risks that are associated with a portfolio or with a set of investments. AI is being widely used in the finance industry for fraud detection. It can be used for portfolio optimization and for automating customer interactions in the form of a chatbot. So if a customer has a question about their brokerage account, maybe they're going to be talking to a chatbot rather than talking directly to a financial advisor, unless they have a question or need to do something that the chatbot can't do by itself. As I talked about earlier, AI is also being heavily used in the transportation sector. It's a key component of self-driving cars, but also of drone deliveries. Drone deliveries rely on a lot of the same technologies as self-driving cars. Even parking assist features tend to be based on AI, and that's been around for a lot longer than most people realize. Back in 2013, I had a Ford that had an automatic park feature. I mean, you think about how long ago that was. That was 11 years ago, and yet self-parking capabilities existed all the way back then. So it has advanced since that time, and what capabilities exist today. Healthcare. We talked about this one a little for things like health screening and triage. It can be used for appointment scheduling, finding times when the physician and the patient are. It can be used for monitoring chronic conditions assisted by wearables. And this goes beyond just basic monitoring. It can also look for signs that the patient produces a signal that justifies being seen by a physician. AI could pick up on that and automatically schedule a patient's behalf. And AI can even be used to automate billing in a healthcare environment. With regard AI can be used to engage visitors in conversations, and not just conversations, but conversations that are specifically designed to the potential customer towards making a purchase. So that's something that AI can be trained on, is having persuasive conversations that are meant to lead generation, recommending products or services based on a customer's behavior. And when it says customer's behavior, trends, but if the customer is visiting a brick and mortar reseller and the customer happens to have that company's app installed on their phone, then AI may be able to walk through the store and see how much time they've spent looking at a particular product. It may send them a coupon based on what it perceives their interest to be, happen in real time. AI can also be used for automated marketing follow-ups, analyzing sales trends, and optimizing marketing strategy trends. And that can happen much more quickly than has been possible in the past. I'm just about out of time, but AI, we've seen lots of examples of that, everything from ChatGPT to things like Siri and Alexa, where anything from answering basic questions to smart home integration to managing media library to personal shopping. How many orders through Alexa? And of course, we all know about AI being used for customer support. As a matter of fact, last summer I met somebody that was their job, is designing AI for use in customer support. And the guy was really cool about it. He's like, I want to apologize in advance for what I do. All those infuriating robots that you have to talk to before you can talk to a live person, I design those. So I got a kick out of that one. But these AI chatbots can respond to customer queries in real time. They can help resolve common issues without human interaction, and then they can route the calls to a human whenever that becomes necessary. With regard to media and entertainment, generative AI can produce high-quality dubbing in multiple languages if you're watching a movie. It can adapt subtitles to the viewer's preferences. Maybe it'll be able to adjust a font size for somebody who has trouble seeing. It may be able to change the speed or the level of detail within the subtitles. And in some cases, AI may even be able to make interactive movies with dynamic storylines. So the person who's watching that movie may be able to influence the outcome of the movie. Maybe several different endings have been filmed, and depending on the choice that the person makes as they're watching it, that determines what movie ending is shown. Then we have things like personalized playlist recommendation, real-time scene analysis. So if you have somebody who's a fan of action movies, maybe this AI assistant will allow them to replay a particularly good action sequence. They might see a pop-up asking if they want to see it again, or it might allow them to skip the slower parts of the movie. The viewer might receive a pop-up that says, hey, this is nothing but a lot of dialogue. There's no action for a while. Do you want to skip this? Yes, that has the potential to be really annoying for somebody who wants to watch the whole movie, but I'm sure this is something that could be turned on and off. So I am just about out of time. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead here, and I'd like to take the last couple of minutes and open it up for questions and answers.
Okay, great stuff. And let's get to as many questions as we can. We only have a few minutes. First question. Which of the AI technologies that you discussed do you think will be the most important for technological advancement over the next 10 years?
I think it's absolutely got to be multimodal input. Being able to cohesively ingest input from multiple sources and make sense out of all of that, that's going to be huge.
All right, looks like we have time for one more question. And it says, now that the first round of Microsoft 365 Copilot subscriptions are expiring, do you expect to see a lot of companies abandoning Copilot?
That's a really interesting question. I think that right now we're at that time of year when organizations are taking a look at their IT budgets for the next year. And typically what we've seen historically is that anytime there's a really transformative new technology that comes out, such as AI in this case, companies spend really heavily on it, and then they tend to pull back in following years and want to spend a little bit less and kind of reclaim some of their IT spending. So we could potentially see companies scaling back on things like Copilot, but I'm not really expecting that. I think that organizations probably realize the value of Copilot, and I think they're going to look to trim IT budgets in other ways.
Okay, well, it looks like that's all the questions we have time for. So thanks again, Brian, for an excellent presentation and answering those audience questions.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay, everyone else, stay tuned. We're going to take a short break and be back at the top of the hour for our second session of the day. Top IT applications for AI technology in 2025. So take this chance to check out those resources on your console provided by Mimecast, Cohesity, and Okta, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our speakers, my fellow moderators, and of course our sponsors underwriting this summit and allowing us to bring you this great content. My name is Chris Paley, editor at Redmond Mag, and I am here to moderate the second session of our 2025 AI Trend Watch Summit called Top IT Applications for AI Technology in 2025. Our speaker for this session is Howard Cohen. Howard is a 40-plus year executive veteran of the information technology industry who today writes for and about the IT channel. He's a frequent speaker at IT industry events that include Microsoft Inspire, Citrix Synergy Summit, ConnectWise, IT Nation, Channel Pro Forums, Cloud Partner Summit, MicroCorp One-on-One, and CompTIA Channel Conf. He also frequently hosts and presents webinars for many vendors and publications. Take it away, Howard.
Thank you very much, Chris, and hello, everybody. Welcome to Top Applications for AI Technology in 2025. As Chris mentioned, I am a creator of compelling content. I write for and about the channel. He listed many of the different companies and partners that I write for. If you'd like to sample my writing, the most easy way possible is to check out the QR code at the bottom there, which will take you to techchannel.substack.com, which is my regular newsletter. It's a free subscription, and I share a lot of thoughts like I'm doing here in writing there. So that's me. Let us move on. I was fascinated in the last presentation to listen to Brian talk about, particularly about agents and about Copilot. Anybody who attended this year's Microsoft Ignite conference will know that Microsoft has no intention of seeing anybody fail to renew their Copilot licenses. They are big on Copilot, and they've introduced Copilot Studio, which is expressly designed to help you create your own AI agents. We'll be talking a lot about that in this presentation. To set the frame for this presentation, one of the things I'm writing lately is a column in Pure AI magazine called Practical AI. I launched it because a lot of people complain to me that the only thing they see in AI is that it can write emails for you, which you could do yourself. And it can make prettier pictures or more rugged looking pictures of you if you want that kind of thing. Obviously, that is just, it's not even the tip of the iceberg. It's just icing on the cake. The cake itself is much bigger, much broader. And I really wanted to highlight practical applications. And as it happens, looking at agentic AI will change the way you look at AI and practical applications. But more on that as we proceed through my presentation. Those of you who have been with me before, and I know a few of our frequent flyers are out there today, know that I like to start every session with a word of the day, and preferably with a friendly group of people like these folks. The word of the day today is interact. Interact. These people are happily interacting, telling each other jokes while they sip coffee and have a great time. And it's fantastic. The more time we spend doing that, the happier we are. The fact is, we've long been interacting with software too. Looks a little different. Looks a little more like this. We're used to having a menu in front of us, and we can point and click on the things we need to do. So let's say we want to send somebody a quote. We go to the far right of the menu there and click quote. Let's say we want to see some more information about some of our contacts. We go to the left side and click on contacts. Whatever we want to do, there's a place to click. What we're seeing in AI today goes way beyond redefining what computers can do. And it actually redefines the way in which we're going to be interacting with digital devices. In the future, you could see yourself getting involved and working directly with an agent, an artificial intelligence agent, on construction work or development work, design work. Now, there are probably many of you out there who are saying, well, wait a minute, Cohen, that's not new. We've been doing that for years and years and years, way back to the 1960s. And yes, there was danger, Will Robinson, but it's even greater today than it was back then. And today we are fulfilling Will Robinson's dream of being able to talk with and interact with our digital devices on a conversational basis. At the recent Ignite conference, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella suggested to us that AI agents will become the primary way we interact with computers in the future, understanding our needs and proactively helping us. And as a matter of fact, it was the core theme of his keynote presentation. Here he is on stage at Ignite talking about how to build an agentic world. So welcome, my friends, to the agentic world. There will be personal agents. Nadella talked about his favorite personal agent, which is running in Copilot for Microsoft 365. And it's running particularly in Outlook, where it looks at his inbox all the time. And when he sits down to his inbox, it tells him which emails he should be looking at first based on who sent them, but also the content of the emails and how aligned it is with the things he usually looks at first. So it's come to understand him and know him. And when we say personal agent, it's truly getting very personal. It's understanding his preferences. There will be organizational agents that do things autonomously for the organization on a regular basis. For those of you who are tasked with kicking out reports for senior executives, there'll be an agent for that will just simply create those reports on a timely basis without any intervention from you or anybody else. There'll be business process agents that take over whole sections of what we see applications doing today. And there will be cross-organizational agents that speak not only to people within your company, but also to people in the company and to systems in the companies that you work with. So Nadella was very excited about the agentic world, and I indeed share his enthusiasm because it represents a dramatic departure from the way we've looked at AI technology and technology in general before. Now, just to catch us up, we are now at the third of 3 stages of artificial intelligence. The first of those stages was predictive artificial intelligence. By predictive, what do I mean? It could look at things that it knew, information that it had, and it could forecast what was going to happen next. One example that I personally got involved with back in 2017, I was writing about Magellan, which was an AI engine offered up by OpenText, and they had it providing a recommender engine. That is, it took the database of customers that a company sold to and the database of products that a company sold, and it ran them against each other in such a way that it figured out, based on everything it knew about the customers, which of the products would be most interesting to each customer individually. And actually, it even then sent out marketing information to those folks and notified the salespeople to go follow up on that. So it took away a lot of the extra work, a lot of the manual labor that a salesperson had to do, and freed them up to spend more time selling, which is what we really want them doing. So that's 7 years ago. More recently, you've all heard of GPT 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12, 15, 1,000, generative AI. And the difference with generative AI was that it could create new content from existing content. Many people have said that, generative AI can't create anything. It's all derivative, and I happen to agree with that. It looks at what it has available to it, and it recombines it into new and interesting ways. And that's where we see these emails that it writes for us. And we see these wonderful pictures of us in fanciful environments and all the other crazy things people are doing with it. There's much more available from generative AI, but that's really what people have seen most. Now, however, we're moving forward and we're getting into agentic AI. And let me just quickly review the three so we can point out the differences. Predictive AI, as I said, basically used statistical analysis and machine learning to take the information it had. It would identify patterns, anticipate behaviors, and forecast upcoming events. That's what it was there for. And you could predict future outcomes. More often than not, they were actually correct. They were accurate. So that was very valuable. And then we moved on to generative AI. With generative AI, we could create content. You know, I heard Brian talking about deep fakes and so forth. And yeah, unfortunately, you know, humans being humans, we found really negative ways to use some very positive technology. But it uses machine learning models to create new content from existing data, as we said. So now let's talk about agentic. Agentic marks a very exciting difference, a new improvement. It basically ingests vast amounts of data from multiple sources. And it can then independently, and in many cases, autonomously, all by itself, it can analyze, determine challenges, develop strategies. And here's the most important part. It can go ahead and execute tasks. So in a supply chain, I'm glad it uses this quote uses a supply chain example. It can not only look at what's going on in the supply chain and maybe where things are delayed, it can also determine and go ahead and change the shipping method and have the products being shipped a whole other way. It can move things from one queue to another queue. It can take action. It can notify people. It can do whatever it has to do to make the changes it identifies as necessary. So that in and of itself, the fact that it can take action, is a huge change in agentic AI. So what do the big boys say? Well, I'm often given to quoting Forrester, and here we are again. They call agentic AI one of the top 10 emerging technologies this past year. So as you can imagine, now that we're going into 2025, it's already got tremendous momentum going in. And if you're going to quote Forrester, you kind of have to quote Gartner too. And Gartner tells us that within the next 3 years, fully a third of enterprise software will be incorporating agentic AI. You'll see applications in which there are multitasking agents working together to complete complex tasks. By the way, that's already possible. 1 out of 5 digital storefronts will be conducted by AI agents. They'll be doing the selling. You will buy stuff from an agent very, very soon, if you haven't already. And here's the one that should shake you up a little bit, and that is that 15% of day-to-day decisions, they're going to be made autonomously by AI agents, which will fundamentally reshape the whole decision-making process. We're going to defer to agents on a lot of the decisions we usually have to make ourselves day in and day out. Therein, again, a complete paradigm shift in the way we interact with digital devices. Okay, so that's some of the big guys. Here's a somewhat smaller guy that I personally think will become extremely big over the next year or two. And this is Clement Delon. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Hugging Face. Wonderful name for a company. Named after the hugging face emoji, which you'll be seeing shortly. And he basically says that machine learning, it's becoming the new way to build technology, replacing software. He sees this movement replacing software. It won't be software the way we have traditionally thought about it anymore. It will not be millions of lines of code. As he says here, it's going to start to do that for us, and it's going to do it much better and much faster. Now, here's another shameless plug. For those of you who read Application Development Trends magazine, I have a column there too called The Citizen Developer. And recently, we've been talking about the shift from citizen developer to citizen AI. Instead of moving tiles around a screen to create new applications, you'll simply be talking to your agent, your AI agent, and saying, okay, I need to automate this routine. It has to do this, it needs to take in this data, and it needs to come out with this result. And it will go ahead and create that for you. And then you can create another one, and you can connect the two, and you connect another, connect another, connect another. This already suggests a way in which we'll be building routines that doesn't resemble what we've ever done before. And so I'll be talking a little bit more about Hugging Face shortly. They're going to play a very important role, they and companies like them. Another face that might be more familiar to some of you is this one. This, of course, is the CEO of OpenAI. Then he wasn't. Now he is again. Sam Altman. And Sam Altman is much more direct about it. To him, agentic AI will be in our daily lives in 2025. This, to him, is the year of agentic AI. So when we talk about new applications for AI technology, agents are the premier new application of AI technology. And here's how we're going to be interfacing with them. A little bit about the characteristics of what an AI agent really is. It's autonomous. That means it can do stuff on its own. Once you set it up, it just goes ahead. And it communicates with you, so you can intervene if you need to. You can communicate with it. You can change its instructions if you need to. But it basically can do things without your oversight. It doesn't need direct human supervision of any kind. That means that you can set it, and to some degree, you can forget it. It is able to perform reasoning. It is capable of reasoning. That means it can do decision-making based on the context of the information it's dealing with. Not just the information itself, not just a go, no-go kind of decision, not just zeros and ones. It's more than digital. It's analog in a very real way. It can make shades of meaning decisions. And that's completely different. And that is the true definition of artificial intelligence. It's moving us one step closer to artificial general intelligence, where it gets much closer to what humans can do. It also enjoys reinforced learning. That is to say, as it does things, as it has interactions with humans, with other data entities, it can evolve. It can teach itself. It can learn and grow. And it can receive feedback and incorporate that feedback into what it does going ahead. And it is capable of understanding normal language. You know, we're all used to NLP, natural language processing. It's been around for a while. And it can comprehend and follow complex instructions. For those of you who would like to see a demo of that, it's actually available to you now, as long as you have a Microsoft account. It doesn't have to be anything special, just a Microsoft account. If you run Edge, the Edge browser, which of course is built on the Chromium engine, so it's just like Chrome. But Edge has in the upper right-hand corner an icon you can click to introduce you to Copilot. And when Copilot comes up, you get a nice, rich tone coming through your speakers. And at the bottom, there's a place you can type, but there's also an icon for a microphone. Click that microphone, and Copilot will say hello to you in the voice of your choice, and you can have a conversation with it. You can ask it anything you want to ask it. It will come back to you with answers. And let me tell you, those answers are extremely conversational, frightening. I've often felt like Copilot has a bit of an attitude of superiority, like she knows more than you do, and she wants you to know it. But you come back and tell me what your experience has been. They can comprehend and follow complex instructions, and they can interpret and they can respond. And of course, they are capable of workflow optimization. That is, they can execute multi-step processes. It's not just a command and go. They can do multiple things, and they can connect to others, and they can cooperate in many, many ways. A few more characteristics. They're goal-oriented. Just like you tell a project manager, we need to get this done by this date, you can tell your agent, I need to get this accomplished by this date, and they will work toward your targets. They will work to accomplish what it is you ask them to do, whether it's operational optimization, boosting sales, or improving customer service. We'll explore all of those in a little while. They are capable of learning and adaptation. That is, they get better at their job over time. We talked about this, just a moment ago. They improve their performance. They grow. So that's very organic. And again, moving closer and closer to the human definition of intelligence. Of course, we probably all know people who never learn a damn thing, but these agents continuously learn and grow based on what they're doing, based on what they're encountering. And they do so to improve their performance. So an agent you start with will not be nearly as proficient as it will be a few months, a year down the line, when it's had a chance to do some stuff and do some practicing and do some learning. Think about your digital devices as learning machines. And they can also be proactive. Okay, we talked earlier, Brian talked earlier about large language models. And indeed, you need large language models. These are the bodies of information that agents work with, okay? In the early days of AI, we connected everything to the internet, and we saw a slew of lawsuits from people who felt that their trademarks and their copyrights were infringed upon. As a matter of fact, I believe it's Canada that is suing a wide variety of news outlets for offending their trademarks. So very important to not just give free, willy-nilly run of the internet to our agents, but rather to give them well-defined bodies of information in the form of large language models. These systems can identify opportunities and potential issues before they arise. They can predict. They can look ahead and say, this may happen. You should be worried about this. Try and imagine in a data center, your AI agent saying, hey, listen, it looks like somebody's trying to attack this system. You might want to take a look at the logs over there. That's amazing, right? In more immediate context, just yesterday, Google announced a new system that can predict the weather accurately for 15 days in advance. Now, we're used to 7-day forecasts on TV. Soon, you're going to see a fortnight, 2 weeks, actually 15 days, because this AI, this agent, can predict the weather 15 days ahead. That's going to make huge changes in the way we manage things like shipping and receiving, ground transportation, emergency management. There's just implications for all kinds of systems from the fact that these things can be as proactive as they can be. So again, more of the characteristics of agentic AI. To give a brief comparison, this TechTarget um, table, which I found very useful. Compares and contrasts agentic versus generative. We're all very familiar with generative now. Since GPT emerged, everybody knows what generative means. The main purpose of generative was to create content based on data that it was trained on and in response to user prompts. Well, agentic AI doesn't wait for any of that. It takes autonomous action and it makes decisions. And not only does it make the decisions, it takes action on those decisions. In the terms of autonomously, yeah, agentic AI is fully autonomous, whereas generative AI really isn't. It really reacts to your input, and it has no idea about what setting goals means. Agentic AI is adaptable to, its behavior is adaptable in response to what it sees and what happens. It's measuring things like weather and other real world activity, power utilization, you name it. If it can get data on it, it can react to it and it can take action to improve the situation. There's some adaptability built into generative AI, but it's not independent. It can't just make adaptations. It can inform you. In terms of goal setting, yeah, agentic AI sets goals and works to meet them. That doesn't exist in the environment in generative AI. And as far as human oversight goes, you're going to be very, very close to your generative AI. It's going to need a lot from you. Whereas agentic, once you tell it what you need done, you shouldn't have to come back unless it says to you, I've run into something I don't understand. So big differences between what we've seen in generative AI and what we're seeing now as we go forward with agentic AI. So how do you develop your AI agent? Let me first say that you will see tools. I mentioned one earlier, Copilot Studio has been introduced by Microsoft as their entry into the develop your own agents market. You will see similar kinds of entries from, obviously from Google, from Anthropic, from OpenAI. There'll be plenty of them. And they'll help you. But there is already a fairly well-known cycle of development around agents. And it begins as any other software activity begins, by defining the objective. What is it you want to do? What is it you want to accomplish? Okay, once you know what you want to accomplish, well, that's true. We've been doing that since COBOL and Fortran. And we'll continue, because that is what it's all about. It's about achieving an objective. So we have to define what it is we want to achieve. You'll then choose an agent type, and there are several different types. There's simple reflex agents that will simply do something based on something happening. There are model-based agents that are connected to the large and small language models and work with those huge bodies of data. Some of them have retrieval augmented generation, RAG. They can reach out to other data entities and pull in more data. Many of them are goal-based agents, utility-based agents that are just doing a job. Yeah, there are low-class agents and there are high-class agents. There are blue-collar agents and white-collar agents. And there are learning agents, which are there to collect information for you. Once you've chosen your agent, you're going to train your model. To be able to train your model, you need to acquire and prepare the data that that model will be trained on. You then are going to select your model. And there are many models to select from. There is a huge world of large language models that are already out there, foundational models that are out there. Developers that I'm speaking to are telling me that you don't want to try to train your own large language model. It's a very expensive and very time-consuming activity. It takes huge amounts of money, huge amounts of time. You are far better served to identify a model, an existing model, that comes close to your application, has the information you very much need, and has the ability through RAG to reach out to other data entities and pull more data in. to get you closer to what you need for your specific application. So instead of starting from scratch, start with an existing model and pull in some more. Now on the screen at the next to last level, you'll see OpenAI is there. Below that is Google Cloud. Microsoft is there. We see Anthropic. There's a lot of names we've seen in the trade press, and a lot of names you probably haven't seen. If we go up to the next level where we see frameworks, those are actually tools that we'll be using to help train models. So all of these things are out there. You really need to make decisions as to which you're going to use yourself and which you're going to engage professional help with, because there are going to be some things that are simply not practical, not economically feasible for you to do yourself. Now, this may change next year. It may change a few years from now. We've certainly seen that curve before. But for the time being, know that there's a lot of activity out there. There are a lot of products out there, which means you've got to be a lot more cautious in selecting which products you want to be using for your specific application. So let's complete the cycle. We talked about models, and before we go any further, I should probably read your minds again. And some of you are thinking, well, how the heck do you go about finding the right model? How does one go and shop for models, for large language models? How do you do that? How do you compare and contrast them? How do you figure out what's better about one than another? And that's a great question that actually has some answers already. And I suspect that this year we will see several more emerge. But one that we've mentioned already, you may recognize the emoji, Hugging Face. That's the Hugging Face emoji. And this is the homepage of huggingface.co. Here, you can see catalogs of models and frameworks and data sets and tools and applications. And you can compare and contrast and figure out which ones you want to work with, which ones have the features you need, so forth and so on. You can enlist some help along the way. A lot of great functionality here in huggingface.co. I believe it's among the first of what we will see becoming a burgeoning number of such resources that will make it very easy for you to start to choose which tools you most want to work with. So now that you've done that, now that you've chosen your model, you're using RAG to pull in more data, it's time to develop the agent to do exactly what you want to do. And then you get into fine-tuning, implementing learning and adaptation. That is, put it out in the field, make it work, and then fine-tune it specifically to your application. And the interesting thing, I mentioned before that developers are telling me you should start with an existing model. They've also explained to me that, and this I found fascinating, it's not so much a function of telling your model what to do by way of your agent. It's not so much telling it what to do. It's actually limiting it from doing everything else. That is to say, you're going to tell the model what not to do. You're going to tell it what instructions from a user it's not to respond to, because you want it to stay focused on the objective that you started with. So it's a reductive kind of a process, which is very different from what we're most accustomed to. So again, you're going to have to be thinking differently. This is a whole new paradigm of computing, and it doesn't resemble anything we've done before, which is exciting, challenging, but it's the way it is. Okay, so we've seen some insight into how we develop an agent. We've come to understand what AI agents are and what they're capable of doing functionally. But we really haven't talked about practical application. And as the writer of Practical AI, that's kind of where I started, and that's where I'm going to continue. When I first started writing Practical AI, I was thinking about how applications will change. Nowadays, I'm thinking much more about how applications themselves will be replaced. Just the way DeLong said that we're going to replace software with other kinds of technology, I feel the same way. And here are some ways now in which that's actually been happening. Let's examine some agentic use cases that are already in existence. And by the way, through these slides, you're going to see this robot show up over and over again. He is meant to, he or she is meant to represent the agent, which is an easier way, I think, for these photographers to come up with it. But anyway, business operations. We're going to be assigning AI agents to take care of very specific business operations, very specific functions, very specific workflows. We don't have to build a single application to do everything. We can simply build an agent to do some things, and another agent to do others, and another agent to do others, and they can all communicate with each other. To me, as a programmer, the advantage is that this is all much more loosely coupled than traditional code has ever been, with the possible exception of microservices running in containers. But this is very loosely coupled, and it's very easy to make changes in the way things work. So business operations is one thing that has already enjoyed some agentic treatment. You heard me mention customer service before. Some of you in the IT industry, I'll just use one example. One practical example that I've already highlighted in Practical AI is Crushbank. Crushbank was in the same business as many of you. For many years, they were an IT provider. They took their knowledge and their experience and they put it all into an AI agent. Some of our companies, some of our IT providers now have their help desk phone answered by that AI agent. Customer calls, the agent answers, "Hi, how are you? What can I do for you today?" They have a friendly conversation and the agent solves their problem. Similarly, you can take that agent out with you if you're a field service technician. And when you run into something and you need to consult some documentation, the agent will provide that documentation. It has instantaneous access to it. And it can even suggest to you some ways you might approach troubleshooting. If you're a ConnectWise customer, you can probably gain access to Crushbank's technology very easily. That's one good way to do it. So agentic customer service is here. You will be talking to what you think is a human, but it's just a very friendly AI. Here's another one that I have a personal preference for, agentic healthcare. I spent some time in the hospital this year, unfortunately. But the one thing I can tell you was most miserable was when I pushed the button to call for help and waited and waited and waited and waited and waited. Imagine having an agentic nurse right there in the room with you, ready at any time to help you, to solve your problem for you, to get you medication, to take your blood pressure, take your temperature, what have you. It's happening now, and it's only going to get better over the next couple of years. But we're already seeing immediate patient help applications of AI agents starting to take shape. Before we leave the concept of healthcare, we should also talk about agentic medical breakthroughs. There have been many stories recently about cures for things that we never thought could be cured that are being developed far faster because an AI agent can consult huge bodies of information and research at insane speed and develop concepts faster than human experts ever possibly could. So now those human experts are working hand in hand, literally, as we see here, with these AI agents to develop vaccines, medications, cures. The way in which we live our lives and the duration of our lives may very well be redefined completely thanks to AI agents in just the next few years. Getting a little closer to home for IT folks, there's agentic software development. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier to my readers of the Citizen Developer. You're now going to be a Citizen AI user. You're going to have an agent that you work with, and you're going to tell that agent, hey, listen, I need software developed that will do the following things. And it will just develop it right then and there, and very quickly, and very effectively. No longer will we have to find somebody who's willing to stay up nights all bug-eyed and strung out on caffeine to get code developed. AI agents need no caffeine, but they will develop the software. So imagine being able to describe your need and have it realized right then and there. And of course, you can interact with it if it doesn't exactly do what you thought you wanted, but maybe it helped you realize, oh, I also need this, I also need. You've never experienced that, right? So there is another application of AI agents. In human resources, the obvious applications in human resources are employees being able to simply ask an assistant, how many vacation days do I have left? Am I eligible for this kind of coverage under our health plan? Those things are easy. They don't have to call a person. They can simply summon up their agent, and the agent will answer those questions happily. Recruiting folks are using AI agents to do two things that are very, very important. If any of you have ever sat in front of a stack of resumes while you're recruiting somebody new, you know just how time-consuming and painful it can be to review dozens or hundreds of applications, one after another, until your eyes go buggy. An AI agent can do that for you. You can tell it what you're looking for. It doesn't have to find the specific keywords you're looking for, because agents don't work on keywords. They work on key concepts. So if you say that you want to see somebody who's been a programmer, it will find things like developer, software, any word that relates to developer, and it will consider those as a possible candidate for you to look at. In addition, first interview. You can have a very friendly AI-generated agent, just like this guy, do your first interview with candidates like the guy on the right here who failed to wear a tie. So that you don't have to go through the first round interviews. They can come back, report what they've heard, compare it to what you described as what you want, in context, with shades of meaning understanding, and really converse with you about which applicants they thought might best fit the need for this position. Moving to the world of finance, the big one is fraud detection. There are many things that go on in financial transactions that can be identified as patterns that may be leading up to potential fraud. It's very much like looking at the logs that come in through your data center and seeing patterns that may represent an oncoming attack. Here we are, these transactions were done, they all relate to each other in these ways, and I see a pattern emerging here that may indicate potential fraud. Doesn't have to be you looking for that. Your agent can look for that. And it can look through far more records, thousands of times more records at much faster speeds with much greater accuracy than you ever possibly could, and detect considerably more fraud than you could ever possibly know. So again, an opportunity to redefine the financial markets by reducing the actual amount of fraud that successfully is committed. Similarly, financial management. You can have your agent assess the market, assess stocks that are available, assess bonds, assess all kinds of financial instruments, and determine which ones may best fulfill your financial goals and financial objectives for a particular portfolio. So yeah, automated portfolio management, no problem for an AI agent. And again, if it takes away all the scut work that a financial advisor has to do, it frees up that financial advisor to do much more valuable work for his or her clients. So we see a lot of that emerging now too. Getting back to the digital world, there is agentic cybersecurity. This is the one that most IT people are very familiar with because they are the victims of having to review endless traffic logs on networks to see if patterns are emerging that indicate an oncoming attack. It's painstaking work. It's very difficult work. It's very error-prone work. It's very easy to miss things. It's very frustrating work. Good news, you won't have to do it anymore. Agents can be scanning your traffic live as it's happening on the network. They can be comparing it to recently emerged signatures and patterns. They can identify from data that comes in from data feeds from around the world of known exploits that are happening elsewhere. They can do all the work that needs to be done to create an effective approach to cybersecurity deterrence. And so even there, we're going to see things like ransomware, et cetera, be tremendously challenged, not by people being more expert, but by AI agents learning what those experts know. And so and there's one more that people ask me about all the time that I should mention. I should have had a slide for it, and that is autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles are also run by agents. These are agents that observe what's happening around them, observe the traffic signals, observe the traffic signs, observe lane positioning, oncoming traffic, and make decisions as to whether or not to make that left turn right now or not. Personally, I recently drove up next to an autonomous vehicle, scared the wits out of me. I'm not comfortable driving next to an automobile that has no driver, but that's me. Okay, all of that, I'll just take you back to 2007 one last time, and you may remember this ad. There's an app for that. Kind of faded away over the last couple of years, but this was the big thing. When apps first emerged, everybody was so excited. You could just click a button on your phone and get a new app. Well, that was yesterday. Tomorrow, there may still be an app for that, but more important, there's an agent for that. And it's a really exciting time to be working with AI. So thank you all for your kind attention. I really do appreciate it. And Chris, do we have any questions?
We do. Good stuff, Howard. I'm also scared of the robots driving the cars, so I'm with you on that. Let's jump in right away with this one. What is the difference between an agent and a model?
The difference between an agent and a model. An agent is something that observes and acts. A model is a repository of enormous amounts of data that you can interact with, or an agent can interact with. It's basically, if you think of the agent as the processor in your brain, you can think of the model as your memory and all the information you have stored in your brain.
Okay, great. John has a great question. Do you have advice for spotting vendor AI washing from services and products that are constantly pitched to us?
I'm sorry, repeat that so I'm sure I got it.
Do you have advice for spotting vendor AI washing from the services and products that are constantly pitched to us?
No, I actually don't. And I suspect that a month ago, 2 months ago, I might have said yes, because there was so much of a mechanical quality to the way in which AIs were doing things. But I mentioned earlier, click that Copilot icon on the Edge browser and have a conversation with her or him. And you'll see what I mean. It's almost impossible to determine whether you're speaking to a human or speaking. Somebody sent me a recording of a podcast, and he showed me how he had requested that podcast to be produced. He had actually given a prompt to an AI agent, and the AI agent produced the entire podcast featuring two people, two guys, happily bantering with each other, making jokes with each other, and discussing the topic. And it was completely AI generated. You couldn't tell by me. That was amazing to me. That's why I say we're entering a whole new stage. And it's exciting and frightening both at the same time.
Agreed. Let's end it with this great question. How do you choose which AI to use from Copilot, Gemini, Claude, Bard, ChatGPT, and all the others?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think there are two approaches to that. There's the approach that a lot of people take, doing tons of research into each of the different models from each of the different companies. You know, what's coming from Google, what's coming from Anthropic, what's coming from OpenAI, what's coming from Microsoft, and trying to determine from your research which one makes the most sense for you. There is, of course, what I like to call the approach that I tend to take. I like to call it the spoiled brat approach. I tend to go out there and try everything and play with it and see how they differ from each other. I'm blessed with the time to do that because it's part of what I do for a living. Not everybody has that capability. I do think that resources like Hugging Face and GitHub really are the beginnings of marketplaces you can turn to that will give you more information in one place that compares and contrasts the different engines, the different models, the LLMs, and the different agent generators that will be coming onto the market like crazy over the next few months.
Okay, great. Looks like that's all the time we have questions. Thanks again, Howard, for the great talk.
My pleasure, Chris. Thank you.